Think you've got history figured out? Think again. Welcome to Top Historical Misconceptions You Still Believe, where we're about to shatter some myths you didn't even know you had. From epic legends to moments you've been misquoting, this video is diving deep into history's most surprising mix-ups. And here's the twist. What you thought you knew might just be totally off. Whether you're a hardcore history buff or just here for the jaw-dropping facts, we've got some mind-blowing revelations that'll make you rethink everything. So, hit that like button, strap in, and let's uncover the truth behind these popular myths. Let's get started. Historical misconception: Napoleon was short. Let's kick things off with one of history's most persistent myths. Napoleon was short. You've probably heard this one 1,000 times. Napoleon, the tiny general, compensating for his height with conquests. But here's the truth. Napoleon wasn't short at all. Standing at about 5'6", he was actually slightly taller than the average Frenchman of his era. So where did the myth come from? A mix of British propaganda, classic rivalry, and confusion between French and British measurement systems. It's almost hilarious to think about, the world picturing Napoleon in his big hat, stomping around like he's got something to prove. And yet, the irony is that this short guy stereotype has grown way bigger than the man himself. His height? Totally normal. His achievements? Anything but. So, next time someone cracks a Napoleon height joke, you'll know the real story. Myth busted. Historical misconception: Vikings wore horned helmets. Next up, let's talk about those horned helmets you always see on Vikings. Spoiler alert, they're pure fiction. That's right, real Viking helmets were all about practicality. Think sturdy iron or leather, rounded to protect their heads in battle. Horns? Nope. They just get in the way, or worse, make you an easy target. So where did this horned helmet nonsense come from? Blame 19th century artists and theater productions. They loved the dramatic flair. It's a bit like imagining modern-day soldiers with capes. Sure, it looks cool, but good luck fighting in one. The mental image of a Viking trying to navigate a crowded coffee shop in a giant horned helmet is funny, but it shows how far pop culture can drift from reality. So, next time you spot a horned helmet, remember, it's more costume drama than history. Myth officially debunked. Historical misconception: the Great Wall of China is visible from space. Let's tackle a massive misconception, literally. You've probably heard that the Great Wall of China is so huge you can see it from space with the naked eye. Well, hate to break it to you, but that's not true. Astronauts have confirmed that, impressive as it is, the wall blends right into the natural landscape. From low Earth orbit, you're more likely to spot bright cities, winding roads, and wide rivers, not a narrow stone path snaking through mountains. Sure, it stretches over 13,000 miles, but at less than 30 feet wide in most places, it's not exactly a giant neon arrow pointing at Earth. Picture an astronaut squinting down thinking they've spotted it, only to realize they're looking at a dirt trail. Whoops. The idea of waving to space tourists from the wall is fun, but let's leave the sightseeing to the stars. Myth busted. Now you know the real view from space. Historical misconception: Columbus discovered America. Let's set the record straight on one of history's biggest myths. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Sorry, Columbus, but no. Indigenous peoples had been thriving on the continent for thousands of years before he even set sail. These communities had rich languages, cultures, and societies already in place. No discovery required. And get this, even if we're talking about European explorers, Columbus wasn't the first. Norse explorer Leif Erikson likely landed in what's now Canada around the year 1000, nearly 500 years earlier. Columbus showing up in 1492 was more like crashing an already well-established party and shouting, "I found it," while the locals rolled their eyes, thinking, we've been here, thanks. Sure, Columbus's voyages were significant for Europe, but let's not rewrite history. Credit where it's due. America's story started long before 1492. Myth busted and perspective gained. Historical misconception: medieval people believed the Earth was flat. Here's a fun one. The myth that medieval people thought the Earth was flat. Spoiler alert, they didn't. By the Middle Ages, most educated folks already knew the Earth was round. Thanks to ancient Greek thinkers like Aristotle and Ptolemy, this wasn't some big mystery. Even scholars like Thomas Aquinas and Roger Bacon were in on the secret. The idea that medieval sailors were nervously peering over the edge of their ships, wondering if they'd fall off the world, is pure fiction. Picture a sailor thinking, "Should I bring a parachute? Just in case?" Funny, but not true. Medieval minds were sharper than we give them credit for, and they were navigating the seas with a solid understanding of geometry. So next time someone cracks a flat earth joke about the Middle Ages, you can confidently reply, "Actually, they knew better." Myth debunked, and props to history's navigators. Historical misconception. Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake." Let's talk about one of history's most famous lines, "Let them eat cake." It's often linked to Marie Antoinette, but here's the twist. She probably never said it. The phrase popped up as a way to illustrate the monarchy's disconnect from the starving peasants before the French Revolution, but there's no historical proof that Marie actually uttered those words. Now picture this, Marie Antoinette at a lavish banquet, surrounded by fancy pastries, dramatically exclaiming, "Oh, they're hungry? Let them eat cake." It's a funny mental image, but it's pure fiction. The quote became a symbol of the growing tension between the royals and the people, rather than a reflection of the queen herself. So while the story makes for great drama, it's more myth than fact. Next time someone brings it up, you'll know the truth. Marie Antoinette gets a pass on this one. Myth busted. Historical misconception. The Salem Witch Trials burned. Witches. Let's clear up a fiery myth about the Salem Witch Trials. No witches were burned at the stake. That's right, hanging was the primary method of execution during this infamous period. Out of all the tragic deaths, one man, Giles Corey, suffered a unique fate, being pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to plead. The trials were a whirlwind of mass hysteria, fear, and social tensions in a tightly wound Puritan community. Picture neighbors accusing each other, shouting, "She's a witch!" while someone's just trying to bake a pie. It's absurd, but it shows how quickly paranoia can spiral out of control. The Salem Witch Trials were a dark and tragic chapter. But here's the truth. The so-called witches were just ordinary people caught in extraordinary chaos. No cauldrons or pointy hats involved. So let's leave the bonfires to the myths. Myth busted, history clarified. Historical misconception. Einstein failed math. Let's debunk a myth that just doesn't add up. The idea that Albert Einstein failed math. Spoiler alert, he didn't. In fact, Einstein was a math whiz. By the time most of us were struggling with fractions, he was teaching himself advanced calculus. Talk about overachieving. So where did this myth come from? It probably started with misunderstandings about his schooling. Sure, Einstein wasn't a fan of rote memorization, but failing math? Not even close. Imagine young Einstein in class, doodling equations about the universe while the teacher's droning on about multiplication tables. The truth is, Einstein wasn't bad at math. He was busy redefining it. So next time someone brings this up, you can say, "Actually, he aced it." Myth busted, and Einstein's genius restored. Historical misconception. The Emancipation Proclamation freed all slaves. Here's a common belief. President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 freed all slaves in the U.S. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, not quite. The truth is, it only freed slaves in Confederate states, places that were in rebellion against the Union. Slaves in border states and Union-controlled areas were still enslaved. It wasn't a total freedom fest. Think of it like this. Lincoln wasn't exactly saying, "Let's free all the slaves." Instead, he was targeting the Confederacy, trying to weaken them. Kind of like saying, "I'll free the ones that make things hardest for us." Funny, right? But also complex. The real game changer came with the 13th Amendment in 1865, finally ending slavery for good. So while the proclamation was huge, it wasn't the full liberation we might think. History? Yeah, it's rarely as simple as it looks. Historical misconception. The Titanic was unsinkable. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship. You've heard this myth, right? It was promoted everywhere, from its design to the marketing, all boasting about its advanced safety features. But guess what? That overconfidence led to disaster. On its very first voyage in 1912, the Titanic hit an iceberg and sank, killing over 1,500 people. Can you picture the crew saying, "Iceberg? What iceberg? We're practically indestructible." It's almost laughable, but sadly, it turned into one of the deadliest maritime disasters. The Titanic's tragic end reminds us of a hard truth. No ship, no matter how grand, is truly invincible. This myth shows just how powerful human hubris can be. So, the lesson here? Even the mightiest can fall, especially when they think they're untouchable. All right, we've just uncovered surprising historical myths, from Napoleon's shortness to the Titanic's so-called unsinkability. But here's the kicker. History is way more complicated than we think. The truth? Columbus didn't discover America. People in the Middle Ages knew the earth was round, and the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free all the slaves. It's a reminder that we should always question the stories we've been told. History is like a giant puzzle made up of facts, interpretations, and yes, plenty of misconceptions. So what's next? We hope this video has sparked your curiosity to dive deeper into history. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep challenging what you think you know. Thanks for watching, and remember, always keep questioning the past.